Thank you, Madam President, Madam Commissioner, dear colleagues. In the last 30 years, Albania and the citizens of Albania have faced many obstacles. Just remember the hard Enver Hoxha regime, which was the hardest which we had in the Eastern Europe communist sphere. And then after the regime change, even in 97, they had the pyramid scheme crisis where everybody lost the little savings which they had. And the country has to overcome these obstacles and has also gone through an enormous change, like few other countries in Europe did. Since 2009, Albania has been on its EU journey. In 2009, Albania applied for membership. In 2014, it became official accession candidate. In 2022, this negotiation started, and also in 2024, the first negotiation chapter finally was open. And we see already these statistics of number is showing that this is a long story. And now, today, we discussed the first report annual report on the progress of Albania as candidate country in this term. The report covers the Parliament's response to the Commission enlargement reports of both of 2023 and 2024. And the state of play and the latest developments of Albania progress in joining the EU. I have to say, and I want to thank also on this point the colleagues, shadow rapporteurs in AFET committee. The report was adopted with a large majority of 57 votes in favour, 11 against and 6 abstentions. Thank you all for this constructive work which has been done. Secondly, before coming also a little bit in the content of the report, I think I'm just looking where they are. I think also there is Albanian delegation today here in the European Parliament from Albanian Parliament here. Welcome in the European Parliament, and hope that your work and our work will lead also that you in the future will sit amongst us here in the European Parliament. Welcome in your house. So, the main topic of the report is of course progress and concerning also some issues like the democratic institution, how they have developed, the media freedom, what are the open issues there. For example, that we have in media freedom still the question of instant, transparent ownership. So it's not the freedom of journalists to ask questions, but it's the question who owns the media platform. We have the question of involvement of civil society. We have the question of fundamental rights, the rule of law, of social economic reforms, of environment, and of regional cooperation and foreign policy. In October 2024, Albania started the negotiations on Cluster 1. In December came Cluster 6. In April 25 came Cluster 2, and in May came Cluster 3. And Albania now has opened 24 out of 33 negotiation chapters. We welcome this fast progress, and Albania has been called a front runner by you, Madam Commissioner Marta Kos, and I think this is very right that they are a front runner. There are some positive or a lot of positive remarks to be made. We see good progress in the implementation of the justice reform, and including also the vetting process in SPAC, in steps in environmental protection, and also in full alignment with foreign policy. And to come also to an end, of course, we see a lot of things to be done. As I mentioned before, media situation, but also the implementation of OSCE ODIHR recommendation, which have to be done on a broader political majority and have to be done also sure in the future. Finishing, I think I want just to say that we fully support Albania's objective to be front runner and to open all the other clusters. but it's more important also to close the clusters and to work on the reforms. And I think if the speed and this unification on the whole country to join the European Union will continue, they will also manage. Our report is a positive one, but putting the points also on the things which have to be changed.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Marta Koos für die Kommission. Bitte schön, Frau Kommissarin.
For the Commission, Commissioner, please.
Madam President, honourable members, dear rapporteur, I would like to extend my gratitude to this House for holding this debate, and especially to you, Mr. Andreas Schieder, for managing to consolidate a very balanced resolution on the 23 and 24 Commission reports on Albania. Thank you for your excellent work. This report comes at a crucial juncture as accession negotiations between Albania and the EU are progressing at an unprecedented pace, as we heard, with the several important milestones already met in the past few months and more to come. Since the opening of the first cluster on the so-called fundamentals in October 24, 4 clusters and 24 out of 33, we heard also, chapters have now been opened. This demonstrates that Albania has seriously engaged in enlargement, while the EU delivers respecting the merit-based approach. We are working closely with the Danish presidency to keep up the momentum. We trust that the 2 remaining clusters will also be opened as soon as feasible. Solid preparation on both the EU and the Albania sides is already well advanced. While work is moving forward across technical clusters, we continue to maintain a very strong focus on reforms in the area of the rule of law and fight against corruption. Albania is expected to consolidate further the very good progress in this area. The continued progress with justice reform and the vetting of magistrates, as well as the good results of the special structure against organised crime and corruption, SPAC, are positive steps which are also highlighted in the Parliament's report. It is crucial that Albania continues to demonstrate concrete progress in key related areas guided by 3 principles. First, justice reform is an irreversible process, and its progress must not only be preserved but further consolidated. Second, the efforts to combat corruption, particularly at high level, must continue with great determination. In this context, the independence of the special structure against corruption and organised crime, SPAC, must be fully upheld. SPAC stands today as the most trusted institution in the country. This must be safeguarded and strengthened. Third, more efforts must be done to uphold fundamental rights, especially media freedom. That begins with stronger measures to protect journalists, ensuring the independence of both the media regulator and the public broadcaster, and promoting true pluralism and transparency of media funding. The growth plan for the Western Balkans will also continue to support Albania on reforms in these areas, which are necessary for its accession path, while granting them access to the parts of the single market before the actual membership in the EU. Honourable members, in the current geopolitical context, Albania and the Western Balkans remain a geostrategic priority for the EU. The swift progress in accession negotiations is a clear signal that we stand by Albania, and we are genuinely committed to marking out a clear pathway for EU accession. But EU accession will remain, above all, a merit-based process. Rest assured that the Commission will continue to actively engage with Albanian authorities to ensure that Albania carries out the reforms needed to become an EU member state. I look forward to continuing close cooperation towards our common objective, Albania successfully concluding the accession negotiations with the European Union as soon as feasible. Ultimately, of course, all these reforms are first and foremost essential to guarantee that all citizens in Albania enjoy strengthened protection of their rights, increased welfare, prosperity and security. And let me conclude with the observation that transformational power of enlargement is clearly seen in Albania. Thank you, dear members of the European Parliament, to work on Albania. I'm looking forward to our discussion.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Now we come to the first round of representatives of the political group, and for EPP, Andrej Kovačev.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Commissioner, dear colleagues. In light of the growing threat from Russia and China, the EU enlargement is no longer a possibility but necessity and an essential geostrategic investment in building a united and strong Europe. I welcome Albania's significant progress on its EU integration path, having opened, as mentioned by the colleagues, 24 out of 33 negotiation chapters in just 7 months. The European Union remains fully committed to delivering on its promises. I welcome particularly the reforms aimed at safeguarding the right of minorities, notably the adoption of the implementing legislation on the right of persons belonging to minority, as well as the successful 2023 population census. The EU enlargement process must remain merit-based. Every country must meet the necessary criteria and implement the required reforms to join the European family. In this regard, I will stress the urgent need for further efforts, particularly in combating corruption and ensuring the independence and proper functioning of the judiciary, free from undue influence and interference, free and independent media. Albania's political system remains deeply polarised and fragmented, with alarming clashes between the ruling majority and the opposition. This was evident in the run-up and during the parliamentary elections on May 11. With unlawful practices and persisting challenges, notably vote buying and misuse of public resources by the ruling party, which were highlighted in the international observers. A functioning opposition and genuine political plurality are vital for the health of any democratic system. Therefore, I call to the authorities to take decisive actions to implement the OECD ODIHR final recommendations and address the complaints and signals received during the electoral process. The Albanian authorities must uphold the rule of law and ensure the separation of powers in order to advance further on their European path. Good luck, Albania. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And the next speaker on behalf of S&D Group is Marco Tarquinio.
Thank you very much, President. Thank you very much to the rapporteur as well. Now Albania is now concertedly following the particular path towards accession, but there are a number of serious and real problems. But the resolve to deal with those particular problems is clear, and working together with Albania is extremely important. There is a great responsibility, and there's need for convergence of political forces, irrespective of the various differences that exist. It's important to move forward effectively on this accession process. I'd like to call upon my colleagues from the Albanian Parliament, some of whom are present here. We need respect, and we need that trust that we've built on all of these particular months. The issue of migration and the various other issues, and also dealing with the image of the country as well that exists abroad. We want indeed for Albania to be part of the European family, and we'll do everything possible for that to become reality.
Mathieu Vallée.
Madam President, colleagues, Commissioner, I don't get it. We're seeing all these drug traffickers, drug terrorists, and you insist on keeping Albanian accession to the EU on track. They're not reliable. We see corruption, we see Turkish influence, we see a threat to the whole of Europe. I don't know if you remember the Europol Police Cooperation Agency's reports. They talk about the major threat, drug trafficking, human trafficking, illicit arms trafficking, people trafficking coming from Albania. The Bataclan attack in France, the people coming from the Balkans there too. Albania plays a major role in transit there. There was a 2025 alert from Europol about Western Balkans drugs coming to the EU. They're a major cannabis producer. They're also a point of entry from Afghanistan. There's cocaine moving through the criminal circuits. So this is a significant political error, putting the security of Europeans, and particularly French, at stake.
Is Alberico Gambino.
Ladies and gentlemen, the report we're discussing today is to look at how far Albania has come along the path of acceding to the European Union. The common foreign policy and the institutional developments would contribute to the regional development. And we have to keep a close focus on the independence of the judiciary, on the protection of fundamental rights and the fight against corruption, as well as overcoming political polarization. These are essential aspects to give faith on both sides to this process. And I think we can note, and listening to Mr. Shida as well, that we are satisfied that they're making progress on this. And we are seeing that there's good cooperation between Italy and Albania on migration issues, and shows that there are shared goals that we can achieve together when it comes to respecting international law as well. Now, Albania is a strategic partner, and they are striding resolutely towards Europe.
Speaker is Ilhan Kyuchuk.
Thank you, Madam President, Madam Commissioner, dear colleagues. Firstly, let me congratulate the rapporteur, Mr. Shida, for his appropriate position that could lay a good basis for us here in the European Parliament. Indeed, Albania is showing its resolve to integrate into the European Union. We can see the very clear positions of both the ruling party and the opposition in Tirana. This resolve is combined with the perceptions of the civil society, not during the elections, but also on a daily basis. Last but not least, with a view to the positive steps that have been taken by Albania on the road to Europe, there have been the strong reforms that have been implemented by the government in Tirana. These reforms are sufficiently ambitious, and they show the intention for Albania to close all chapters by 2027. Now, the question to the Madam Commissioner, if Albania fulfills all these criteria and by 2027 manages to close all chapters, will there be the political will on the part of the European Union to have the enlargement into the Western Balkans?
Chair, dear Commissioner and dear members of the Albanian delegation, maybe there, and dear rapporteurs and shadow rapporteurs, thank you very much for the report and the great constructive work. Albania is an accession frontrunner, making solid progress to fulfill its aim of entering the EU by 2027. And that could be historic, of course. Albania's EU memberships will accelerate economic prosperity for its citizens, increase the geopolitical strength of our union, but also encourage other candidate countries to make work of the reforms. Of course, we need more improvements on rule of law, fundamental freedoms, media freedom, tackling corruption. But I'm confident that it is possible for the Albanian government, dear Mr. Kuchuk, that the Albanian government will deliver on these priorities in time. And I hope that the EU will give all its support for that aim. But we can only credibly demand to stick to a merit-based approach, to improve the rule of law and refrain from political blackmail if we do it ourselves too. And the Italy-Albania agreement opposes exactly these principles, because it's an abuse of Albania's EU aspirations by one EU member state to dump people out of its borders. This agreement is inhuman, is expensive and ineffective. And the Commission's silence so far is deafening. Let us end this hypocrisy and stick to the values that we demand from our candidate countries too. Thank you.
Thank Thank you very much, and I beg the colleagues, the private talks not cross the whole room. It would be better to go closer together if you want to have private talks during the speech of other colleagues. So the next speaker is Sebastian Everding.
Jeder auf der Welt hat
Everyone in the world has their dreams. That's what the Albanian writer Ismail Kadare said. My dream is for Albania to see environmental protection as a bridge rather than an obstacle on the road to the EU. However, recent developments such as the Vlora airport built in the Vjosa Narta protected area are a cause for concern and violate EU environmental laws. We need stronger measures to protect endangered species, and indeed, I think that the Vjosa National Reserve, its designation, was very, very important indeed. Let's also not forget the issue of animal welfare. There are thousands of stray dogs in Albanian cities. This is something that has to be dealt with in a holistic fashion. But the solution that has been found is to kill many of these animals in a cruel public way. The animal shelters are few and far between. They're overcrowded. Neutering programs are infrequent, and they're not funded by the state but by NGOs. So yes to Albania's membership, but the conditions for animal and environmental protection have to be met.
Next speaker is Alexander Zelf, the ESN. €1 billion is being given to the Albanians, to the socialist partner, by Ursula von der Leyen. There was an election, but it, I think, had little to do with democracy. Edi Rama is locking up his opponents. Those who are monitoring the election say there's ballot stuffing, ballots being bought as well. International drug trade is one that's benefited from this. Extreme brutality. The Albanian mafia is controlling marijuana and cocaine flows. And so there are billions of euros going there, and you're seeing palaces being built like in Dubai. There's mass corruption very broadly across the nation. Rosa Luxemburg Foundation talks about the kleptocratic control of the state by the Socialist Party, and that's why people call Albania a mafia state, Colombia of Europe. Ms von der Leyen now wants to let this country into the European Union, and I ask you, what is the added value for our citizens? Why should German taxpayers pay for the luxury lives of mafia bosses and corrupt politicians in Albania? We're not going to play the game. We're saying no to the EU accession of Albania, and we're saying no to this Commission. The next speaker is Michael Gahler.
Thank you very much, President, colleagues, Commissioner. Dear Andreas Schieder, thank you for your report, where you highlighted a broad range of issues that are of relevance for the accession of Albania to the EU. You highlighted also some positive developments, like SPARC, this body that is combating corruption, and indeed there is a need for that, and also the Commissioner said that efforts to combat corruption at the highest level must be maintained. Now, I've been in Albania on occasion of the latest election. Technically that went well, but indeed we as observers and the OSCE, we concluded that there was not a level playing field, that there was an abuse of incumbency, meaning that, for instance, they afforded to pay an extra €100 to pensioners just not short of the election, or that the fines in trafficking in the car fines, they were abandoned 2 days before the election. So these are issues that should not happen and that will have to be addressed, including also with the recommendations that had not yet been implemented. And indeed, I have to say, the stories that you hear apart from election observation about the structures that relate to money laundering, that is a fact. There are 30,000 apartments standing there empty because they have been built with laundered money, and people looking for flats they cannot afford it. There are these drug trafficking schemes, and we have to see, and I'm confident we will manage that these structures will not profit from entry into the European Union. They must be crushed before this country enters. Thank you very much.
Vielen Dank. Der nächste Redner ist
Thank you. Brando Benifei is the next speaker.
Thank you, President. respect for the law is a fundamental point of the EU, but Meloni has signed an agreement with Albania, 800 million, throwing taxpayers' money away. It's inhumane, useless and expensive, and it does not respect the law, and it does not deal with the migratory challenges. Different European governments, including those close to Meloni, have not supported it. Many of us do support Albanian accession, but this should not be instrumentalized to bring in harmful, wasteful agreements. We need to pursue this aim in a serious way, supporting reform and supporting them moving closer, integrating with our own union, and we need to do that from within this House. Thank you.
Here's Alexander Nikolic.
Well, I don't know if you've noticed, but you've spent more than 2 billion euros since 2007 on Albania, and the French taxpayers are not going to see that money again. What are the results? Well, you said in your report as well, there's a gangrene of corruption in Albania. Freedom of the press doesn't exist. It's really what Europol is referring to as all sorts of crime and drugs going on, and this is endangering our security as well. Let's admit you're basically opening the door even wider for traffic in organs, prostitution, drugs and mafia. And what is your conclusion? Oh, you want to give them even more. 922 million more. New 922 million extra. We know that it's not going to change anything with this disastrous situation in this country, unfortunately. And part of this is going to end up in the pockets of oligarchs and mafia. So why not set them an exam to get into the EU when they're not actually ready? So my question to you and to Ms von der Leyen is, who gave you the right to play with this money and the security of Europeans in this way?
Thank you very much, President. Now, the Albania report shows us that Europe is oblivious, doesn't care about the truth. The entire property issue has been ignored. A Greek minority in Albania is losing rights over the property that pertains to it, and their homes and their churches are being destroyed. There's always some sort of impediment for them to be able to enjoy those rights. In the report, there is joy expressed about the judicial system. That's a laughable issue, I think. We see mafia active in the country. They are running the situation from the top to the bottom, and of course their network spreads from the United States to China as well. There is no mention of the Greek minority of northern Epirus as well, and there is no mention of the political and social reality of the country with its numerous idiosyncrasies. There's nothing mentioned about those ties with Ankara as well. Mr. Katsifas, from his grave, is waiting for some sort of justice. He is a victim of that para-state, that deep state that operates in the country. And, of course, we have a total distortion of the situation, of the history, not only there, but in neighboring Northern Macedonia as well. Thank you.
David McAllister is the next speaker. Go ahead, sir.
Madam President, Madam Commissioner, dear colleagues, since becoming a candidate in 2014, Albania has indeed made progress, yet major reforms remain imperative. The 2023 and 2024 reports on Albania have highlighted persistent challenges. The parliamentary elections in May this year took place in a deeply polarized environment. There are frequent parliamentary boycotts, constant confrontations, and a lack of real dialogue. As we just heard, our election observation delegation, led by our colleague Michael Gala, confirmed that these elections were competitive, yet marred the abuse of public resources and vote buying. The Central Election Commission's limited enforcement failed to ensure a level playing field. The road ahead demands more than technical fixes. It requires political will and broad consensus. Real reform cannot come from a party alone. It requires dialogue, trust and inclusivity between all Albanian political forces. The European Union, and especially this European Parliament, stands ready to support Albania's reform efforts, but the commitment must come from within. Thank you.
Vielen Dank.
Thank you very much.
Angeline Furet.
Madame le Président.
Madam President, colleagues, today we're being asked to examine the 2023 and 2024 reports on Albania. Billions of euro, for what? For what exactly? To finance a corrupt regime, muzzled press, propping up a corrupt regime. European taxpayers deserve better than that. French taxpayers deserve more than that, to be precise. Let us stop propping up corruption and those who despise democracy. Let us call for results and transparency before we give any more money.
Next speaker is Fredi Belleris.
Thank you very much, Madam President, Commissioner. The report we're discussing today, in my opinion, actually beautifies the situation instead of presenting the real situation in Albania. I would like to point out that the population census was questioned as to the method and results by 8 of the 9 recognized national ethnic minorities. The much-discussed judicial reform has failed by the constant interference of the Albanian government. As a result of it, in other words, a few hours ago, the European Union ambassador denounced another interference on the part of the Albanian Prime Minister into the judicial system. In the last elections, reports of the OSCE and the European Parliament observers speak of political pressure exerted on voters, media manipulation, organized crime interference there in the electoral process, and suspicious sources of funding. In Albania, only 50% of the property has been returned to rightful beneficiaries. As far as the Greek minority is concerned, only 20%. The law on self-identification remains deliberately unimplemented. Finally, according to the governor of the central bank, 4 billion euros are circulating outside of the banking system in a country with a GDP of only 27 billion. If we continue along this line, we'll simply be fanning Euroscepticism. Thank you very much.
Chiara Gemma.
President, Commissioner, Chamone said that Europe won't fall from the sky. It will be made through crises, and it will be the sum of the solutions we find to those crises. Albania, in its path towards the EU, is facing challenges, but they're showing that they want to turn them into opportunities for growth. Now it's up to us to accompany it with a consistent and responsible approach, because enlargement is not a favour, it's an investment in our common future. As the chair of the EU Albania delegation said, we cannot ignore the important issues that need to be covered. There need to be decisive and specific steps taken in those areas. The political polarisation is a problem. Nevertheless, there is a common approach that we want to pursue here, and civil society and the Albanian diaspora in Europe wants to see this. Albania is looking towards us with trust, and it's up to Europe to come back in a firm but constructive way.
Catch the eyes.
The next speaker under Catch the Eye is Helmut Brandstätter.
Thank you very much, President. Commissioner, following this discussion, I had the impression, but I understand now why it is so difficult to have any conversation with the right-wing extremists. They come out and say, if you look at Albania, it's just a gang of drug dealers, and there's only crime. Yes, we heard about it. There is crime, there are problems, the media situation is not perfect at all. But on the other hand, there is a strong civil society that wants to develop. On the other hand, there is very strong Russian influence there, which you probably like, but which is very dangerous, not only for Albania, but is also very dangerous for us. So we have to talk to them. It's a merit-based process, as we heard many times, which is very good, and the Albanians have to prove that they can be part of the European Union. And one last sentence, when I was in Albania in the early 1990s, many people spoke Italian and they knew a lot about the world, because from the Italian media, even in this terrible communist system. And that brings me again to the idea we have to give more information for those societies today who have no information, like Belarus, where nobody of the right-wing people were there, like Russia and other countries. That's also our job in Europe. Thank you.
Unter Catch the Eye ist Maria Zakaria.
Maria Zakaria under Catch the Eye.
Η έκθεση για την
The Albania report, which hides the terrible reality of the Greek minority of northern Epirus, properties have been expropriated, houses are being destroyed in Himara and in Avlona, and supposedly all of that to develop tourism. All of this is at the expense of the owners as well. The Greek minority has shrunk demographically, not only because of migration, but because of the census which was conducted, which was done in a totally false fashion, and where Greek identity was suppressed. Greek ownership is limited, schools are closing, and teaching of the language and cultural identity-related issues have been totally quashed. Microphone, please. We have no microphone for the speaker.
Can you take another microphone, please? It's a technical problem.
Okay.
So violation of fundamental rights have been documented by international organizations. Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch have mentioned that there's a limiting of press freedom, that there's police surveillance in a total violation of human rights. And at the same time, during the Council of Ministers, there was celebration about the progress that Albania was made. This is unacceptable and laughable as well. Thank you.
Commission. Frau Kommissarin, Sie haben das Wort.
Commissioner, you have the floor.
President, honourable members, many thanks for your contribution to this debate. We welcome the Parliament's recognition of the significant strides Albania has taken in the right direction in the context of the accession negotiations. At the same time, we count on Albania's government to continue pursuing all reforms needed to address remaining shortcomings. Tackling this challenge will require strenuous efforts from the Albanian government, as well as working hand in hand with the opposition in the parliament and civil society at large. Enlargement is a whole-of-society project, and full buy-in across Albanian society will be needed to reach Albania's ambitious but realistic goal of closing all negotiating chapters by the end of 2027.
Vielen Dank, Frau Kommissarin.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. To conclude the debate, I'll give the floor back to the rapporteur, Andreas Schieder. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you, and thanks everybody for contributing in this important debate, and thank you for Commissioner also for the work. There is a huge necessity for reform in front of Albania. I think this is one conclusion we can draw. And it's true, the polarization in the political field is very deep. But one thing is different to other countries in the Western Balkans. Everybody is pro-European in the Albanian parliament and also in the Albanian society itself. And I think this is also the power which can lead to implement all the necessary reforms. This is the power which can lead towards a European Union. And we have to say the success of these reforms is in the interest of Albania and the Albanian citizens. But it's also in the interest of the European Union and the European citizens. Therefore, it's worth to work on this. And finally, I also want to say very soon the European Parliament will open its antenna office, which is responsible not only for, but also for Albania in Albania, but will be also a liaison office for implementing all these reforms in the Western Balkan countries. So also this is an argument which counts for the upcoming debates. But at the end, all the best also to Albania to keep the speed going on in reforms, and then the end will be a European.
Vielen Dank, Herr Schieder. Die Debatte ist nun geschlossen.
That concludes the debate, and the vote will take place tomorrow. That takes us to the next item on our agenda. That's Mr. Kolar's report, the 2023 and 2024 reports on Bosnia and Herzegovina. Mr. Kolar, you have the floor for 4 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Chair, dear Commissioner, dear colleagues. The report on the 2023 and 24 Commission reports on Bosnia and Herzegovina is the first report since the election of this House. Now, the main aim of the report was to show strong support for Bosnia and Herzegovina's accession path. The country is not just some country we don't know much about but pretend to care about. Bosnia and Herzegovina is a battleground where another struggle for increased Russian influence is currently taking place, so we must be interested. This was in my mind while working on the report. Now, it is symbolic that we are discussing this report during the 30th anniversary of the events in Srebrenica and the signing of the Dayton Peace Agreement, which still today very much affects the functioning of the country. And against the backdrop of commemorative events, we now focus here on the future of the Balkans, which I believe is in Europe and not under Russian domination. The report calls for the implementation of necessary reforms as well as the fulfillment of 14 key priorities set by the Commission on Bosnia and Herzegovina's membership application. We welcome the opening of accession negotiations with Bosnia and Herzegovina and also welcome the reform agenda recently presented by the country. Bosnia and Herzegovina fully aligns with the EU's foreign security policy but needs better enforcement. We stress the need to integrate the Balkans into the European family and full awareness of the Russian war in Ukraine and its growing desire to weaken Europe by all means, using not only military but also other hybrid tools such as disinformation campaigns, supporting proxies of Mr. Putin in the region, Russian intelligence operations and hybrid attacks on EU member states. In the report, we focus on the growing willingness to divide the country and openly call on the EU and member states to take actions, including targeted sanctions against all destabilizing actors, notably Milorad Dodik, as well as other high-ranking Republika Srpska entity and Serbian officials providing political and material support for secessionist policies. We need to understand that there is a risk of rising anti-EU nationalism within and beyond the region. We call for the EU to stay alert and to avoid what I call a Georgia scenario for Bosnia and Herzegovina. Even though 75% of citizens of Bosnia and Herzegovina back EU membership, reflecting strong public support, the EU needs to be present there and show its interest in welcoming Bosnia and Herzegovina to its family. But it is not only about the EU. Bosnia and Herzegovina also needs to fulfill its obligations. We stress the need to focus on electoral law, which is still discriminatory, constitutional reform and the lack of judiciary independence. Additionally, high-level corruption remains widespread. There is a need to end violence against women, minorities and vulnerable groups. On the EU side, we pledge to continue our support. We need to focus on helping civil society and making Bosnia and Herzegovina a place where young people want to stay and build a better future for the country. Unfortunately, EUFOR and NATO presence are still crucial for peacekeeping and reform support. All actions that tend to weaken or question the Dayton Agreement jeopardize the existence of the country and can lead to chaos. Finally, I would like to mention once again that despite many areas requiring further improvement, the European Parliament strongly supports Bosnia and Herzegovina's path to the EU. Bosnia and Herzegovina plays a crucial role in the European Union's enlargement strategy and will become a part of the European family, I'm sure. Bosnia and Herzegovina is in a very difficult situation and we must find a way to help it achieve full integration into Western structures. Developments in Bosnia and Herzegovina demonstrate that every day that we must strive for peace, stability and development, because if we give up, we may, in the worst case scenario, once again face war and destruction. I would like to thank everyone who has participated in the debate over the report and in its preparation. I would also like to thank my two colleagues, Tineke Strik and Antonio Tangier Correa, who have joined me at a fact-finding mission in April. During the negotiations, we have reached 23 compromise amendments, and I think we've managed to submit an unbiased report. And I would like to ask all of you for its support. Thank you.
Thank you. The floor now goes to the Commission. Commissioner Koss, you have the floor.
Members, dear Rapporteur, I wish to thank you, Mr. Andrzej Kolar, for your work on the report concerning developments in Bosnia and Herzegovina. In 2 days, I will travel to Srebrenica together with the President of the European Council, Antonio Costa, to pay my respect to the victims of the genocide in Srebrenica in its 30th anniversary. What happened in Srebrenica was the culmination of 3 years of war and ethnic cleansing, with over 100,000 victims across the country. While remembering the past and our responsibilities, we need to do our utmost to help build a better future, as you have said, for all citizens of Bosnia and Herzegovina. Wounds from the past should not impede building a better future for the next generations to come. Therefore, I truly believe for Bosnia and Herzegovina the only way forward is EU accession. Over 1 year ago, the European Council decided to open accession negotiations with Bosnia and Herzegovina. This was the right call, as the future of Bosnia and Herzegovina is in the EU. Yet, the past year has witnessed renewed challenges with the unconstitutional and secessionist legislation and initiatives adopted in the Republika Srpska entity. The EU response has been firm and unequivocal, and domestic institutions such as the Constitutional Court have proven able to step up to the challenge. We expect the Republika Srpska leadership to respect the decision of the Constitutional Court to repeal the secessionist laws and to respect the outcome of the ongoing trial in front of the Court of Bosnia and Herzegovina. This is necessary to de-escalate the situation and return to delivering reforms and advance towards EU accession. In line with the March 24 decision of the European Council, we expect Bosnia and Herzegovina to take all relevant steps that the Commission identified in 2022, so that the Council may adopt the negotiating framework and we may hold the first intergovernmental conference on accession negotiations. These steps include adopting a new law on the courts and a new law on the High Judicial and Prosecutorial Council, fully in line with European standards, and appointing a chief negotiator. These reforms require all pro-EU political actors to join forces and deliver. The recent signature of the Frontex status agreement illustrates that when there is a will, this is possible. And there is some positive development also on the field of growth plan. I am very happy that Bosnia and Herzegovina is finally taking the required action not to lose the opportunity of over €1 billion of investment through the growth plan for the Western Balkans. I welcome the political agreement found in the Council of Ministers ahead of the regional summit in Skopje last week, and I expect the immediate submission of the reform agenda to the Commission so that Bosnia and Herzegovina can benefit of the full amount of the allocated funds. The Commission will assess the content of the reform agenda for agreement as for all other partners. Distinguished members of the European Parliament, progress on the EU path is the best guarantee for the stability and prosperity of Bosnia and Herzegovina. The Commission will continue supporting Bosnia and Herzegovina's EU accession perspective as a single, united and sovereign country. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The first speaker in the first round on behalf of political groups is Ivo Davos-Stier for EPP.
Ovog tjedna obilježavamo 30 godina od genocida.
Tomorrow we will be commemorating 30th anniversary of the genocide committed in Srebrenica. We're also this year commemorating the 30th anniversary of the Dayton Agreements and also the 75 years of the Schuman Declaration, 75 years of peace, and Bosnia and Herzegovina wants to subscribe to that. That's why I'm calling on everyone to adopt the law on the judiciary system in Bosnia and Herzegovina so that the negotiations continue. They should do all it takes so that they can use the growth plan measures, because the decisions of the EU, the European Court of Human Rights, and the Constitutional Court of Bosnia and Herzegovina are being implemented. Every people making up Bosnia and Herzegovina should have the right to select its own representatives, because this is a multi-ethnic, multi-confessional nation, but that doesn't mean it should be condemned to failure. It can achieve success. It can be a state to itself. There is no contradiction between civil liberties and federalism. On the contrary, these two dimensions are complementary, and that is what will allow for unity in diversity in Bosnia and Herzegovina. And that's the motto of the EU, the place of Bosnia and Herzegovina in the future. We fully support this.
Dear colleagues, dear Commissioner, yesterday we paid tribute to the victims of genocide in Srebrenica, and we were talking about how important reconciliation is. Today we're talking about Bosnia and Herzegovina's future. I believe that future lies in its progress to EU accession. And this is also reflected by its nation, who wants to be part of a peaceful and democratic EU. So we need to really support them in their efforts. But there are threats looming in Bosnia and Herzegovina. After three years, we have a menace of nationalism and secessionism. And who is the bane and the real menace who is undermining all these efforts? This is only one person, Milorad Dodik. He represents a real threat to the stability of Bosnia and Herzegovina. So we really need to join our forces and help all people in Bosnia and Herzegovina. The EU needs to, without hesitation, adopt sanctions against Dodik.
Of the PFE, Antonio Tanger Correa.
Madam Chair, Madam Commissioner, I'm going to speak in Portuguese. Well, eu, em primeiro lugar, gostaria de louvar os esforços do relator.
Thank you. I would like to praise the work of the rapporteur. The rapporteur has done an excellent job to prepare this report. But there are some mistakes. Specifically, there seems to be a different reference as to the Republika Srpska and the Republic. There was no dialogue with the Srpska Republic if you compare this to the representatives of other groups, such as the Bosnians. And that really makes things very complicated, and it's not an objective report. Bosnia has two entities which are ever more separate one from the other, and we're running a risk that the country is going to be more divided than 30 years ago. We need to understand this. 30 years, I went to Dayton. I was an ambassador in Bosnia. I'm very familiar with the country, and at that time they were closer to the European Union. 20 years ago they were closer to the Union, and that is a serious situation. We need to see more dialogue, and we must not demonize the Serbian side compared to the Federation. Nobody talks about an increase of the influence of Iran, Turkey, Qatar, Islam. That is just as unacceptable as interference of Russia and China in the Czech Republic. We need to find a dialogue.
Of ECR is Zserban Dimitrie Sturza.
Stimată doamnă președinte,
Dear Madam President, dear Commissioner Koss, dear colleagues, the EU's enlargement is a strategic priority. Bosnia and Herzegovina must continue their European path based on concrete progress and based on the compliance with the accession criteria. Accession cannot be a symbolic gesture or an ideological instrument. It must reflect real reforms in the country. At the same time, we have to be lucid. External interference in the Western Balkans are becoming more and more aggressive. By actively supporting the enlargement of the area, the EU will enhance its own security and will mitigate destabilization risks. I believe that the European Parliament must support unequivocally the territorial integrity of Bosnia and Herzegovina and its constitutional order. However, we cannot ignore that the absence of genuine political will for reforms slows down this path. Bosnia and Herzegovina still has important steps to take, and the European Union must maintain the requirement yet remain fair. Accession is won and not offered. Thank you.
The next speaker is Helmut Brandstätter for Renew.
Kommissarin, ich werde auf Deutsch.
Commissioner, I'm going to speak German because I'm also speaking to all the people from Bosnia-Herzegovina who live in Austria. A lot of them had to flee their country and found a home in Austria. And they're important to me because they have contacts to these countries.
Arbeit und auch den anderen, den Schattenberichterstattern. Wie gesagt, Bosnien-Herzegowina und die Bevölkerung, sie gehören auf jeden Fall in ihrer Vielfalt und ihrer Einzigartigkeit zur Europäischen Union. Die EU-Mitgliedschaft ist der einzige Weg, wie wir Bosnien zu Europa bringen können. Das ist selbstverständlich.
Bosnia-Herzegovina belongs in Europe, and the only way we can bring them to Europe is through the European Union. We have a problem at the moment because there is an attempt to destroy everything in cooperation with Russia, with China, and with economic interest. We shouldn't forget President Vučić either, who sees it as his task to destroy cooperation and cohabitation in Bosnia-Herzegovina. The people of Bosnia-Herzegovina deserve a peaceful state. We'll work towards it.
Thank you very much indeed. The next speaker is Tineke Strik for the Greens.
And also dear rapporteur, because I would like to thank you very much for the cooperation, also together with the other shadows. And the adoption of the annual Bosnia report could not come at a more symbolic moment in a week that we are commemorating Srebrenica, the horrific genocide of 30 years ago that still keeps the country hostage today, deeply dividing the political scene and the society. The Dayton structure after the war was only supposed to be a temporary solution, set up under enormous pressure to stop the atrocities, but over time actually entrenching the deep divide within the country. As confirmed by the European Court of Human Rights many times, this Dayton structure is not democratic. It is used as a business model nowadays of ethno-nationalistic politicians who fuel tension for power and self-enrichment. So the international community, especially the EU, must act to help the country overcome division and let Bosnia prosper as an inclusive and real democracy and, of course, as an EU member state. That is the only way, colleagues, to truly pay tribute to the many victims and survivors of the genocide 30 years ago. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Reinhold Lopatka.
Dear colleagues, I want to mention at the beginning that I think we have to see the reality. Bosnia and Herzegovina has only made limited progress in the reform agenda. When we compare this report with the other reports from the region, we see there
big differences. Yes, on the one side, Bosnia and Herzegovina continue to align with EU foreign and security policy. Very important for us that new laws have been adopted on border control and data protection. But we have to see the role of Milorad Dodik. He has initiated unconstitutional actions undermining state laws, and he is always using secessionist rhetoric. Here we must condemn this in the strongest term as we can, and we have to support the unity of Bosnia and Herzegovina. So here we stand at crossroads. So we should continue with our support for Bosnia and Herzegovina, but we should also have in mind how Milorad Dodik is acting as he was acting yesterday, as he's doing it today, and I think he will not change in the future.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Tonino Pizzula.
Hvala, gospođo predsjedavajuća, gospođo povjerenice, kolegice i kolege. Ovog tjedna obilježava...
Commissioner, ladies and gentlemen, this week we're commemorating the anniversary of the genocide of Srebrenica. I'd like to express my sympathy to the victims and their families. The negotiations are opening the door to a better future for upcoming generations, but there's still threats of secession. There's a lack of respect for international legal and indeed also national legal decisions, and there's some very unconstructive things happening at national level. So there's now a break on political progress in Bosnia and Herzegovina. So thank you, Rapporteur, for the work that's done. Minorities and all peoples need to be respected, as do legal decisions. We're sending a clear message confirming the European pathway for Bosnia and Herzegovina. We have to make sure that we recognize the possibility for future. Bosnia and Herzegovina is a part of Europe, and any step towards that will...
Thank you very much. I give the floor to Mr. Nikolic. You have 1 minute.
Depuis tout à l'heure, je vous entends parler.
Well, I've been listening to you when you talk about the situation in Bosnia, and it is within their interest to enter the European Union. My question is, what is the role of the European Union? What is the objective? The European Union is normally a large zone which should be good for trade, to be more powerful. We've seen this in the past. Certain countries have entered and their standard of living hasn't increased. In Bulgaria, the situation is very similar. In Bosnia, it is even worse. I mean, I think we're going to be coming closer to the situation in Bosnia. We'll be living closer to Bosnia rather than Bosnia coming closer to our standard of living. The situation in Bosnia, I'm quite familiar with it, and I'm very concerned. Just like yourselves, yes, there's a global influence of mafias, of organized crime, of Qatar, of the Saudis, of the Turks. It's an area which is being taken over, and it's very dangerous to have this country enter the European Union with these kinds of countries which have a true influence, which are corrupting a lot of people. Yes, we don't know where the money is going, and there's a lot of mafias running Bosnia. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bartolica. 1 minute.
Colleagues, this year there are several important commemorations. We've already talked about the horrendous crime perpetrated in Srebrenica, but it's also 30 years on from the Dayton agreements. And I'd also like to talk about the 30 years of the 30 years military operation in Croatia, which not only freed Croatia, but as far as the European aspirations of this country are concerned, let me say the following. The best guarantee to have Bosnia-Herzegovina to remain in the West is to support its people, who for 30 years have been under great pressure. On the one hand, there is the pressure from the Serbian world, and on the other, there is the influence of the Islamic countries, which are constantly investing in the country. So there is a European future, but we must be fully aware that inside Bosnia-Herzegovina, it's the Croatian peoples who represent the best guarantee for Bosnia-Herzegovina to remain fully European.
Thank you very much. I give the floor to Mr. Bosanac.
Pozdravljam ovaj izvještaj koji jasno detektira probleme s kojima se BiH I dalje suočava na putu prema Europskoj uniji.
In this report, many issues are reflected which Bosnia-Herzegovina has in the face of the European Union. Well, when I go there, people are very hospitable, they're very peaceful, and people want to improve their lives. Most people want to join the European Union, but this is then always stopped because there's nationalist political forces which try to find succession and to try to cover their own interests. In the Srpska Republic, this will continue being so, and things are not going to change unless the citizens of Bosnia bring pressure to bear on them. So don't allow them to try to pocket all these hundreds of millions of euros. Don't allow them to change this country. This Parliament expects to get members from Europe and from Bosnia to come here.
Mr. Vanke, 1 minute.
Frau Präsidentin, Frau Kommissarin.
President, Commissioner, first of all, I'd like to thank Skola for the work done. I basically support the report because it very realistically describes the structural challenges and deep-going problems which would be linked to accession for Bosnia-Herzegovina. If we don't want to just do symbolic gestures, we really want to discuss, we need to look at the situation and take seriously the views of the Serbian part, even if it's not aligned with our Russia-phobe attitude at the moment. We need to give the country time to stabilize and to work as a political unit before we start talking about accession. Symbolic facades doesn't help anybody. It just leads to disappointment in Sarajevo and in Brussels because you can't live on nothing.
Thank you very much. Madam Zeljana Zavka, 1 minute.
Poštovana predsjedateljice, poštovana povjerenice, zahvaljujem izvjestitelju Kolaru.
President, Commissioner, I would like to thank the rapporteur who has well recognized the fact that peoples are the foundation of the state in Bosnia-Herzegovina. 30 years on from signing the agreements and at the beginning of the sitting, we showed our respect to the victims of the genocide 30 years on. The Tempest military operation that we celebrate the 30th anniversary of in August led to the signing of the Dayton agreements and avoided a massacre. 30 years on, the Croats have played an important role in this, but we're not represented in the presidency of Bosnia-Herzegovina, whereas we should actually be the guarantee. So we need to recognize the need for a political agreement which would implement the rulings of the Constitutional Court in Bosnia-Herzegovina and other courts, which would allow us to come back to civilian peace. And so for the agenda reform, all of the competent bodies must be set up and do their work to ensure that the financial support that we have voted in favour of for Bosnia and Herzegovina can be actually used. It's not acceptable for Bosnia-Herzegovina to remain the poor relation of this policy. Thank you. Mr. Rouget.
Madame la Présidente, chers collègues.
Thank you much, President. Bosnia-Herzegovina is a state which is artificially kept alive through the Dayton Agreement. The only thing that works is Srpska in Bosnia. However, the fact that President Dodik has been found guilty by a court of justice, which can be challenged, indeed has been challenged, has fed the centrifugal tensions of Bosnia. However, it would be illusory to think that you could have a Bosnian state without damage. That would mean that the Serbs would be marginalized, and it would contribute to Islamization of the region. Such a project would turn its back on the historic complexity of Balkans and would lay the foundations for future conflict. The duty of Europe is to stabilize Balkans by respecting the Dayton agreements and to support a constructive dialogue between Belgrade and Zagreb. The Patriots for Europe supports this and requires respect for this guidance and the balance of the Balkan.
Thank you very much. Now, Mr. Sousa Silva, 1 minute.
Senhora Presidente, Senhora Comissária, caros colegas.
Madam President, Commissioner, colleagues, the European Union shoulders a responsibility, a strategic responsibility to stabilize and establish stability in Bosnia-Herzegovina. The message is a clear message. This is a European problem and it is Europe that needs to solve it. But if we're not going to do it, then others will do it in our stead. Others that are interested in destabilizing the region, together with China and Russia. Words are not enough, and to turn a cold shoulder is not a good thing either. So we need to make progress in these negotiations. It is a political tool which some are promoting for succession. We need a reform that unites, not divides, with the technical and financial support, fight against corruption, foreign interference. That is the only way in which we can show our credibility. If we don't have this, then we will lose credibility and we will lose Bosnia-Herzegovina. So therefore, we will not give up. We will continue supporting Bosnia-Herzegovina.
Thank you very much. Now we are going to start Catch the Eye. The first one to speak is Tomislav Sokol.
Hvala lijepa. Izvješće o Bosni i Hercegovini kritizira sve izraženije separatističke.
Thank you very much indeed. There are the secessionist movements which seem to be completely flying in the face of movement towards Europe. But we've seen that happening. The unitary nature in achieving that in Bosnia-Herzegovina is going to be the main obstacle to overcome because there are three different peoples there. It allows for the hegemony of the majority peoples and stops the Croatians coming into the presidency. So one of the foundations of the state is its people. We should also stress that the rise in anti-Semitism is of great concern, particularly in the mainly Bosniak regions. And that was something which raised its head quite recently. The Croatians right now are the only constitutive peoples in Bosnia-Herzegovina which, in a very frank way, are looking towards the West and the European Union. So we need to guarantee their equality of treatment.
Thank you very much. Now, Mr. Tinkinen.
Madam President, Russia's aggressive interference in the Western Balkans, especially its direct support for Milorad Dodik and secessionist forces in Republika Srpska, is a calculated attack on European unity. The Kremlin's goal is clear: to destabilize Bosnia and Herzegovina through Dodik, fracture the region and undermine the EU's influence. Dodik's frequent meetings with Vladimir Putin, coupled with the adoption of anti-constitutional laws, are not isolated events. They are a hybrid campaign targeting our collective security. We must respond with strength. The EU cannot turn a blind eye to the Trojan horse of Russian intelligence on European soil. Peace, sovereignty and democracy in the Balkans are not negotiable. They are the European values. We need to be stronger to block Russian influence. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I give the floor to Raquel Garcia Hermida van der Walle. 1 minute.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the Rapporteur, and thank you, Madam Commissioner. Nearly 30 years ago, more than 8,000 men and boys were murdered in Srebrenica. The international community, including the Netherlands, failed them. And this truth leaves us, as Europeans, and me, as a Dutch politician, with a debt of honour, an ereschuld. That's what we say. Today I met a genocide survivor. He was 10 when he fled through the forest with his little brother. 6 days without food, dead bodies along the way. Today he lives back in Srebrenica, but he doesn't have a job, even though he has the right skills to be a history teacher, because he faces institutional discrimination and economic exclusion. I think that in such a way, scars will never heal. They're not allowed to. So my question to you, Madam Commissioner, is if you would be willing to explore the possibilities within the instrument for pre-accession assistance for specific funding for victims or survivors of this genocide, maybe as part of the growth plan for the Western Balkans. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Now, Sunčana Glavak.
Hvala vam lijepa, poštovana povjerenice, zahvaljujem prije svega kolegi na ovom izvješću.
Thank you so much, colleagues, for this report. 30 years have gone by since the Srebrenica genocide and the Dayton agreements. And also the Oluya operation. Well, the European path for Bosnia-Herzegovina is the only guarantee for the stability and development of this country. We therefore condemn the rhetoric and the successionist attempts which threaten Bosnia-Herzegovina. Bosnia is prepared to negotiate, and they will do this when they register progress. They're the ones who need to take a step. Those representing the Croatians in Bosnia need to receive exactly the same treatment as anyone else. You cannot possibly question the rule of law or territorial sovereignty of Bosnia-Herzegovina. There need to be electoral reform to put an end to discrimination, and we have representativeness of the Croatians. So I call upon all the actors in Bosnia to return to reforms and towards European integration. Thank you.
Thank you. Now on Marta Kos on behalf of the European Commission.
Madam President, honourable members, thank you for the opportunity to hear your views and concerns regarding the situation in Bosnia and Herzegovina. It has been a valuable exchange illustrative not just of the challenges on Bosnia and Herzegovina's EU path, but also the clear way forward. This requires de-escalation by the Republika Srpska entity leadership, a clear pro-European orientation of the authorities of Bosnia and Herzegovina, and a return to delivering on the EU path. This includes adopting pending judicial reforms, appointing a chief negotiator, and submitting and later implementing a reform agenda to the Commission for agreement. So the Commission will continue to support Bosnia and Herzegovina on its path towards the EU. Synchronised and coordinated communication is key in this regard. By rejecting divisive rhetoric and building bridges of reconciliation, even if this is very, very difficult, especially because of Srebrenica, Bosnia and Herzegovina can progress on its path towards European integration, benefiting generations to come. And yes, I'm ready, together with my services, to check how we could contribute to the possibilities of your idea. I will do this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Commissioner. Now I will give the floor to our rapporteur, Mr. Kolar. You have the floor.
Thank you very much. Dear Commissioner, you mentioned the commemoration of Srebrenica on Friday. Honestly, I will be there too, but I would be much more happier to visit the country at a more cheerful occasion than this one, honestly. Thank you all for your remarks. I think that I won't hurt anyone's feelings when I say that we share a productive approach, and that is very, very, very good. I see also that we share the understanding for the need of judicial and legal reforms for the rule of law. Again, I praise this. Milorad Dodik was mentioned here, and that the report is not, it doesn't reflect the needs of the Republika Srpska entity. My answer to this is I do not intend to negotiate with individuals who have troubles with the law. I'm sorry about that. But it does not mean that I will not talk to anyone from Republika Srpska. I've had meetings with representatives of this entity, simply because I understand the necessity to listen to all the arguments that are on the table. I just have some red lines. Honestly, one opinion that I've heard when I was there in Bosnia is that the majority of those who want to live in the EU have already left the country to live in the EU. And that is quite sad. Another opinion that I heard there was that due to the inability to make an effective move from Dayton to Brussels, as we say, due to which we still keep military contingents in the country, Bosnia and Herzegovina is simply a protectorate. Sorry to say that. I think that we finally need to get over this. If we don't get over the past, we won't be able to move toward the future. That's true. I've spent half of my life outside of the EU and half of my life inside the EU, and I can tell you that being inside is much better, and I would love to share this experience with other countries, with new countries that will join the EU as well. And I think it is in our best interest, when Russia was mentioned, to share our future with newcomers. But it won't happen by itself. Russia does everything possible to demonstrate that the EU is not the only option. But we must strive to ensure that everyone understands that the EU is the best option. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I hereby close the debate. The vote on this point will take place tomorrow. Now, let me pass on to the following point of the agenda, which is a report by Thomas Weitz on North Macedonia for the years 2023-2024. I would like the rapporteur to speak now. Over to Thomas Weitz.
Thank you, Chair, Commissioner, colleagues. North Macedonia is a fantastic country, north of Greece, south of our wonderful Strasbourg here. North Macedonia is a country that came through the Balkan wars of the 90s without massive outbreaks of violence, even though this country is a very diverse country that constitutes of different peoples, different ethnicities and different religions. But still, they managed to form a peaceful society. North Macedonia once was front-runner 20 years ago when they started their accession process, a front-runner together with Slovenia. Where's Slovenia today? And what happened to North Macedonia? Well, some obstacles were on the way. Obstacles related to history, obstacles related to wars in the last century, obstacles in the way in terms of building good bilateral relations to their neighbors. And good bilateral relations always need to be built from both sides. That is very clear. EU negotiations have not formally started yet. We could, but they have not formally started yet. Still, the country, as it has 20 years of accession path, has already implemented quite substantial amounts of European acquis. So if you look at the legislation, they're actually quite well on track. If you look into them being a partner for the European Union, they have been a reliable partner to us. They are sharing our common foreign and security policy 100%. They have been joining NATO. They have been joining our common efforts that we have in the European Union. And especially today, when we see the geostrategical situation, when we see that we Europeans understand that we need to defend our destiny by ourselves, and that we Europeans need to stand together in the light of what globally is happening, especially in this light, I think we should look into speeding up accession process with North Macedonia. But also I must say the report, and I thank my shadow rapporteurs for the good cooperation, the report covers a full picture of where the country is. And some parts we're commemorating, other parts we're still demanding reforms. The report talks a lot about the constitutional amendment that is demanded to start accession talks, constitutional amendment that includes additional minorities into the constitution, also the Bulgarian one. This report talks a lot about hate speech, about hate crime, about a need for prosecution. It talks about the need for rule of law and further developing not just legislation, but really making it felt for citizens. And the report talks about the need to fight corruption. None of our countries is free of corruption. But the question is, do you have institutions that have the ability and the resources to tackle, to fight corruption? This is the main question here. We're talking about the economic situation that has positive sides, but also downsides. And lack of ability to uptake the support that comes from the European Union. This is very important that the country invests into professional structures and keeps professional people that have once shown that they can. This country is full of amazing natural heritage, mountains, lakes, cultural sites. But unfortunately, the country is also full of waste, illegal waste deposits and pollution. Yes, there is a bettering of the situation, but still there's a lot to do. We can say that in North Macedonia, civil society still has space to work. And also we see a lot of foreign influence. And we have to fight against foreign influence, whether it's Russian, Chinese, Saudi Arabian, Serbian, wherever from. People need to decide upon their own destiny. So we talk about media, also about the need for transparency on the ownership of media. And we talk about the potential this country has. This report is an important stepping stone towards EU accession, and I hope that many of you tomorrow in the vote will support this report, will support the accession of North Macedonia to the European Union, at least the next step that we can take in a constructive and united and pro-European manner. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Now, on behalf of the European Commission, Marta Kos.
Madam President, honourable members, dear rapporteur, thank you, dear Thomas Weitz, for your excellent and tireless work on the report of North Macedonia. I would like to thank the European Parliament for its constant engagement in strengthening democratic processes in North Macedonia. You have a key role to play in encouraging all political forces to work constructively together to advance the country on its EU accession path. This report is the first one to be adopted in 3 years. The EU hereby sends a clear message of support to North Macedonia's European path, as well as on conditions necessary for moving forward. During my discussions with the leaders of North Macedonia in Skopje last week, I reiterated our commitment as EU to support the country in moving forward in the accession process. I also recalled on several occasions the necessary steps that need to be undertaken to open accession negotiations on the fundamental cluster. This only way forward is to adopt the constitutional amendment. North Macedonia has made progress on the opening benchmarks. It submitted updated roadmaps on the rule of law and public administrative reform. They are also continuing work on the action plan on the protection of minorities, which will require the necessary consultations. The documents are currently being reviewed. We encourage North Macedonia to finalise them swiftly. North Macedonia has also taken a proactive approach concerning the growth plan and was the first country to receive pre-financing under the reform agenda. Efforts should not stop there, and implementation of the reforms will be essential. North Macedonia remains committed to fully aligning with the European common foreign and security policy, underscoring its consistent and long-standing European aspirations. The report on North Macedonia provides a comprehensive and balanced assessment of the situation in the country, including in key areas such as the rule of law. North Macedonia needs to step up reforms, especially in the area of fundamentals, and should further strengthen the rule of law, in particular the independence of the judiciary and the fight against corruption, and reform its public administration. We also urge North Macedonia to uphold fundamental rights, the freedom of expression and media freedom. Civil society has a key role in fostering and protecting important values. The accession process is a key driver for crucial reforms. It is therefore important that North Macedonia continues to progress on the accession process, first and foremost by implementing the constitutional amendments as agreed by the Council. Government in Skopje has historical opportunity and responsibility to make decisive steps towards the EU and use the enlargement momentum that is clearly there. We continue to support North Macedonia on its path to the European Union.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Now, on behalf of the EPP, I would like to give the floor to Mr. Tonin. You have 2 minutes.
Dear President, Madam Commissioner, dear colleagues, North Macedonia has been an EU candidate since 2005, with 20 years of efforts toward membership. During this time, the country has demonstrated real dedication, made important reforms and moved closer to the EU. Yet, we must be clear, enlargement must remain a merit-based process. Countries that deliver results and respect democratic values should get a clear and fair EU response. The next step is to adopt the constitutional changes requested by the EU Council in July 2022, including the formal recognition of the Bulgarian community. I call on all political parties in North Macedonia to engage constructively in this process. This step is not just a technical. It reflects the European principles of inclusion, respect for diversity and minority rights. Let me also stress that bilateral issues should not block the start of the negotiation process, especially since member states have the final say. Enlargement is one of the EU's strongest strategic tools. Let's not undermine it because of historical disagreements. We must focus on the present and find a way forward. At the same time, we should not forget that enlargement is not simply a political priority, it is a strategic choice. It delivers economic benefits for both existing member states and new ones. Therefore, advancing North Macedonia's EU integration is not only in the interest of the country itself, but also in the interest of the European Union as a whole. I cross my finger that we will have soon North Macedonia as a full member of the European Union.
Thank you very much. Now, on behalf of the Socialists and Democrats, I give the floor to Thijs Reuten. 1 minute.
EU and Macedonians share the vision for the country's European future. The very good work of the rapporteur and the negotiations resulted in a comprehensive and balanced report, recognising that enlargement decision-making should not be misused to settle bilateral disputes. They require diplomacy based on equal footing. After everything North Macedonia has gone through, up to changing the name of the country, Macedonians' frustration is understandable. However, another constitutional amendment is necessary, but we call on the Council to ensure a credible accession path without new conditions for the next step in the accession. And on Macedonian language and identity, let's be short. They exist and this Parliament respects them. And for the road ahead, I want to encourage our colleagues in the Sobranie and ourselves to think about what to answer to our children and grandchildren when they will ask us what we did when we had a chance to change the future of a country and of Europe. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now on behalf of the Patriots for Europe, Aphrodite Latinopoulou. 1.5 minutes.
Today I will speak to you as a Macedonian because I'm a proud Macedonian, a real one, not a fake one like the residents of Skopje who shamelessly say that's what they are. But what was Skopje? It was a piece of land that centuries after the vast Greek Macedonia of Philip and Alexander the Great of Greece was taken over by some Slavs who centuries later demanded to be called North Macedonian. I can't say that name, but that's a distortion of history and of reality. And yet this unacceptable demand was actually put into practice by the Greek government of Tsipras and Kamenos. It was natural capitulation that gave away the language, ethnicity and history to Slavic people who came to the region centuries after the golden age of Macedonia, which was and is Greek. Unfortunately, the current New Democracy government has said that, given the opportunity, it would denounce the agreement, is insisting on actually not doing so, even though Skopje is consciously violating this despicable agreement on a daily basis. We've reached the point where the honour of the true Macedonia and Greece is being defended by the Bulgarians, whose reaction is correct, because they know that the current language of Skopje is a Bulgarian dialect and their nationality is Bulgarian. If we want peace and good relations in the Balkans, history must be restored. Otherwise, their accession to the EU won't happen even in their dreams. Macedonia is one and it is Greek. So get over that.
Thank you very much. On behalf of the ECR, I would like to give the floor to Mr. Valchev. 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam President, Madam Commissioner, ladies and gentlemen. Here we very often speak of human rights and the rule of law. Tell me then, in which member state of the EU can you send a man to prison just because he's quoting a historical figure? In which member state do you attack people because of their ethnicity? Or which member state violates international treaties? Here with us tonight is Mr. Lupcho Georgievsky. He's a worthy Bulgarian who can be sent to prison just because he has the audacity to call himself a Bulgarian from North Macedonia. I sincerely believe that North Macedonia can be part of Europe. But in order for us to be together again, North Macedonia should turn its back on its masters in Belgrade. It should fight for human rights and defend the human rights of the suffering Bulgarian community. I'm now addressing the Macedonian society. Mitskovsky is lying to you. Inserting the Bulgarians in all relevant parts of the constitution and meeting the commitments related to the treaty with Bulgaria from 2017 are not going to threaten your identity, but if you lag behind with the reforms, this will undermine your ambitions.
Dan Bana, 1 minute.
Madam Commissioner, well, listening to the previous two interventions, this has not been an easy file. It was marked by some controversy, sensitive issues, and of course, always facing misinformation. Nevertheless, the fact that we finally have a report after 3 years is a major step forward. I congratulate the rapporteur and the other fellow shadows for their resilience in the face of an obvious smear campaign, and I praise the negotiations process, which is the essence of politics. The European Parliament is not in the business of qualifying or quantifying core national issues. Our report is here to assess North Macedonia's path to becoming an EU member. Reforms, step forward, but also areas where the country needs to pick up the pace. My message today is one of hope. Our past determines our present, and our present determines our future. This is the path towards progress. I hope that all actors will, at some point, act wiser and responsibly and recognise enlargement for what it is, a strategic imperative benefiting our nations and the entire continent. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, on behalf of the left, GU NGL, Konstantinos Arvanitis, 1 minute.
Κύριε Συντονιστά, σας ευχαριστούμε πάρα πολύ για τη συνέντευξη.
Thank you very much indeed for your excellent work. And today we're discussing the report on North Macedonia's accession process. Actually, that in itself is welcome news because the previous report never actually reached plenary. The accession of our neighbour to the EU depends exclusively on the PRESPA agreement. There's no question about it. No linguistic games and no opportunistic attempts to undermine what is an international agreement. Accession, for those with a European perspective, depends on meeting the Copenhagen criteria without double standards or hidden agendas and always in the interests of the peoples of Europe. And we are always going to remind everyone how historic the agreement signed by Tsipras and Zaev was. We are out and out in favour of the accession process of North Macedonia and the Western Balkans on the condition of their respect for the European acquis. And we hope that the European Commission will show the same zeal for the Western Balkans as it does for Eastern Europe. Thank you.
I give the floor to Mr. Stoyanov. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. The process which led to this report was marred by many violations. Even before the North Macedonian government has become a part of the EU, or the country has become part of the EU, it started with its lobbying. We call for these violations to be investigated. This report will go down in history with something else. It is the first time that the European Parliament has tried to recognize a language and an identity. This is a very dangerous precedent. In Bulgaria and in North Macedonia, there is only one people who speaks one language, Bulgarian. Over 12% of the population of North Macedonia has proved its Bulgarian origins, and they have acquired the Bulgarian citizenship. The number of these people is rising, and we are one people. Thank you.
Thank you, President, Commissioner, colleagues. The long-suffering citizens of the Republic of North Macedonia have been waiting for more than 2 decades their well-merited European future. But the politicians in Skopje are not in a hurry and systematically sabotage this process. Instead of reforms and true progress, we are witnessing populism, nationalist rhetoric, and Bulgaria is represented as an enemy that stalls the European integration of the country. This results into direct repression against people who feel Bulgarian, who are the heirs of the majority of Macedonian Bulgarians. They suffer repression, discrimination, and open threats, which is the case of Mr. Lupcu Georgievski, who is here tonight. The European Union cannot turn a blind eye to this. The encroachment upon the rights should stop.
Of the adopted Council conclusions from 2022 and the negotiation framework. They asked the rulers there for more, and they got the firm position of Bulgaria adopted unanimously by the Bulgarian parliament. They are not and will be not further in the future other conditions than those mentioned above. My urgent call to the political elite of this beautiful country is, don't waste more time of your citizens and start the negotiations process immediately. We will support you and we will warmly welcome you in the European Union. Dear politicians from North Macedonia, the destiny of your citizens is in your hands. Don't look around to find enemies and excuse your counterproductive actions by them. И накрая искам да изразя една голяма надежда.
And let me express this hope. I do hope that the hour of freedom will soon appear in Macedonia.
Mr. Shida, 1 minute.
Thank you. It's a long time since my first
meetings and visit to Macedonia, or Fyrom in these days as it had to be called, and since days I've seen politicians in the country, some which were terribly corrupt and flew the country, but also others which did a high effort to solving the problems in order to have a better future for the country, going beyond the line for a better future. And therefore, I would say it is also important nowadays to have such politicians. And my call is also on the ruling party and the government in North Macedonia to adopt the necessary steps in order to get the negotiations for the European Union membership. But I also call on the Bulgarian politicians to understand that an accession of North Macedonia is in the interest not only of North Macedonia, but especially also for Bulgaria, and therefore they should work together and not try to block the accession of North Macedonia.
Thank you very much. I would like to give the floor to Mr. Sturza.
Stimată doamnă președinte, stimată doamnă
President, Commissioner, colleagues, our vote on the North Macedonia file is more than a legislative exercise. It is a political signal. The EU needs enlargement in order to remain relevant and stable in a changing world, and North Macedonia needs us. It needs a clear signal that its European path is open when it finalizes the constitutional reforms that it has promised to undertake. This country has taken brave, even painful steps on its European path. If we don't recognize their efforts, we risk to lose the confidence of the citizens and the trust of the political class there. And even more seriously, we risk leaving foreign influence which is roaming there from outside of Europe. Yes, they must implement real reforms. Enlargement is not a terrain, should not be a terrain of disputes, but proof that Europe respects its word. North Macedonia's place is in our European family. Thank you.
Mr. Christoph Petrov.
Уважаеми колеги,
Colleagues, I am Bulgarian. I have visited Macedonia many times, much before it adopted the name of the Republic of North Macedonia. And my colleagues in Ohrid, Bitola, Strumica know the same as my friends in Sofia, Plovdiv, Blagoevgrad, Burgas and elsewhere. In politics, there should be people who are there to do good. But there are also people who are in politics because they have nowhere else to go. And it depends on all of us who of them will represent us. Are we going to be represented of those who want to build our European future together? Or are we going to depend on those who want to separate us in our past? The intelligent people in Macedonia deserve to be in Europe, whereas politicians who feed on hatred must remain hungry. Thank you.
Petar Volgin, 1 minute.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Republic of North Macedonia categorically does not meet the requirements to start accession negotiations. The rights of the minorities are not observed. Representatives of the Bulgarian minority are persecuted in court and out of court, and the crimes against the Bulgarians are very often unpunished, or the sanctions are symbolic. Add to this the impudent theft of Bulgarian history and Bulgarian cultural heritage, and it quickly becomes clear that this country does not deserve to be a member of the EU. Now, why do the Eurocrats insist on Skopje starting negotiations? The reason is the same as the one why Bulgaria was ordered to become part of the Eurozone. The Eurocrats want to show that all these structures are still wanted, craved, irrespective of all the crises. But turning a blind eye to the violations of European rules on the part of member states is not a recipe for welfare. Thank you.
Madam Zaharia, 1 minute.
The Prespa agreement just meets geopolitical interests. It's the product that was of pressure from the government, which was exercised on the then Tsipras government, and forcing MPs both in Greece and in the neighbouring country. It's based on a fake history, which has built a fake nationality for the people, saying they come from the ancient Macedonians, and brought together in that way the very different ethnicities of the people living there: Turks, Serbs, Slavs, Albanians, Roms, Greeks and Bulgarians. So no Macedonian identity nor ethnicity. That never existed in the former Skopje or in Vardas or Ronda. The Greek people was never asked to accept Pseudo-Macedonia, and we won't accept it. The reference to the fact that this is an example of conflict solving, well, that's just not acceptable. Macedonian is Greek.
Madam President, 21 years ago at Mostar Airport, I was waiting for President Rakovsky. His plane never arrived. He crashed with all his cabinet people I knew. He was a great man of peace, man of reconciliation. He made the Ohrid Agreement, and he was a man who brought the peace in Macedonia at the time. I remember him from the conferences we used to attend together, and everything he suggested was bringing a peace in Western Balkans. Mostar, my hometown, since then has a special memory and close tie with Macedonian people. Enlargement is a merit-based process that must firmly enforce the respect of fundamental values of European Union, while at the same time acknowledging the progress made on the path of EU. North Macedonia has undertaken substantial reforms to advance towards European integration. Over the last 2 years, North Macedonia maintained its full alignment with the EU common foreign and security policy and participated in EU military crisis management operation, including EUFOR Althea in Bosnia and Herzegovina. North Macedonia needs to make a progress in respect of the right of minorities, including the protection of minority languages. They will do that, I'm sure. Unfortunately, some member states do not uphold the respect due to North Macedonia. I wish North Macedonia well on its path to EU. I wish this country to find the friends like us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, Christian Vigenin for 1 minute. Madam Commissioner, ladies and gentlemen, I've only a minute to say 3 things to the citizens of North Macedonia. Bulgaria wants you to become part of the EU. No matter what you're being told, we are your friends. I now address the policymakers in Skopje. Stop looking for excuses. Stop creating a parallel reality. You have now started accusing the EU of not being democratic. Invest your efforts in our joint European future instead of creating controversy about our past. You cannot erase the past, but you can participate in the construction of our common future. Amend your constitution, insert the Bulgarians into the constitution, let them be equal to all other ethnicities, give them a chance. And now I'm addressing my colleagues. This report was related to lots of tension, and at the end of the day, nobody will remember what's written in it. People will only remember the scandals. So in future, we need to be much more careful and not involve in conflicts and solutions that we cannot solve. I wish every success to Mr. Georgievsky.
Madam Jovieva, 1 minute.
please pay attention to what I am saying. This report is a report of a voyage, of a journey, of a candidate country. So this journey is a story of a country that has been humiliated, but is better than some member states. What this report is not is a report on the right of existence of Macedonian nation and language. I do have to say I will not vote for its deletion, this wording, but I need to also point out that I'm also hurting, like you are, but please do not actually believe the discourse that is saying that the European Parliament wants to deprive you of your identity and language. And my message for warmongers is Macedonian identity will not disappear because of your lobbying or just because of one vote. Blagodaram.
Thank you very much. Now, Liudas Mažylis for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam President, Commissioner, colleagues. 2 decades ago, North Macedonia initiated significant institutional reforms and it gained EU candidate status. But its integration process has dragged on unreasonably slow. While the European Union insists that enlargement benefits everyone, it has hesitated at key moments. In today's geopolitical climate, delaying strategic decisions only serves the Kremlin's propaganda, and it undermines pro-Western sentiment in the region. North Macedonia has consistently shown its commitment to European values. It takes part in EU missions, its foreign and security policy is closely aligned with that of the Union, and it's one of the most advanced candidate countries. Endless discussions about internal EU reforms as a prerequisite for further enlargement must not become an excuse to stall the enlargement process. So let's finally set a date. Why not 2027? And if not 2027, then when? Thank you.
Now the next speaker, Mr. Lazarov, 1 minute. Madam President, ladies and gentlemen, in a report of this sort, irrespective of the country discussed, there should be no mention of identity or language. Moreover, the Republic of North Macedonia is a multi-ethnic country. There are people who define themselves as Macedonians, Albanians, Turks, Serbs, Croats, and Bulgarians who are being oppressed by the governing politicians. The task of a report of this sort is to discuss whether the commitments have been met, whether the Copenhagen criteria have been met, and whether human rights are observed. There should be no mention of language or what people feel like, because such mention destroys the functional integrity of such a report and sows the seeds of division. Thank you.
Now, catch the eye procedure. Madam Walsman has 1 minute. Please stick to the allocated time, because I would like to give the floor to everyone who has applied for it.
Sehr geehrte Kolleginnen und Kollegen, seit 2 Jahren.
Colleagues, for 20 years, North Macedonia is trying to join the EU with the support of the population. And despite all these challenges, countries have really made huge progress. But there are bilateral conflicts that are blocking the way, and this somehow undermines the trust in North Macedonia and the possibility for integration in the EU. Further reforms are necessary. I understand the problems on the spot. They can't be an excuse to postpone accession time and again, because the trust in the EU needs to be strengthened, because North Macedonia needs to be getting the prospect that it deserves. I support the report very firmly. European Council needs to send out a signal, a clear signal, so that we can start the next phase of negotiations, taking account of the language and identity of North Macedonia. And the EU Commission needs to actively support further steps. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I give the floor to Yerdisi Adi.
Well, from Cyprus, I have to speak out against what's happening in the Prespa Agreement, which is against democracy because it has not been legitimised by the Greek people. I also have to speak against the results of the resolution in the Macedonian people, and they're trying to create a Sefto-Macedonian identity. Nations are not to be created as we like, but they are shaped by what has gone before. And we have to bear in mind the Greek names of the past and the Bulgarian language as well. Macedonia was, is, and will remain one and Greek. I would like to speak to our French colleagues. How would you feel if a neighbouring country took over your language, your history, talking about Napoleon Bonaparte and saying that he was their own hero and teaching that in the schools? That's exactly what we are experiencing as Greeks.
Pan poseł Nikola Minchev. Nikola Minchev.
President, Commissioner, colleagues, Bulgaria supports the full membership of the Republic of North Macedonia of the European Union, and our support has been long-standing. We were the first to recognize its independence. We have a good neighborhood agreement. We supported Macedonia to join NATO. However, we are alarmed because instead of focusing on fulfilling its commitments under the French proposal, including respecting the rights of the Bulgarian minority, the current government of North Macedonia emphasizes the anti-Bulgarian rhetoric, and we see this in the verdict against Ljupcho Georgievski, who is here. And this is a comfortable excuse to stall the negotiations. I'm glad that after a lot of efforts we agreed on the content of the report, and I hope this will be repeated during the voting tomorrow. This is in line with the decision of the Council. And interruption now of the speaker.
Zahvaljujem. Javio sam se za riječ samo zato što sam čuo opet jako puno bilateralnih.
Thank you. I'm taking the floor just because once again I've heard a lot of people talking about the different bilaterals between Bulgaria and North Macedonia, and that reminds me of what happened in my own country when Slovenia was blocking it. I think we're now able to go and have an alcohol-free drink and laugh about the situation we had at the time, because it was a border conflict and it's now totally ridiculous. This difference of opinion has not yet been regulated because one person thinks the border goes in one point and the other thinks it goes another point, but it doesn't matter because both Croatia and Slovenia live better than they did in the past before they joined the EU. So I suggest that we all calm down. Let's have Macedonia join the EU and then let's deal with bilaterals.
Branislav Ondrush.
Madam Chair, I want to thank Thomas first of all for his very good job. Thank you, Thomas, for the report. I think the report is very good and is mirroring the real situation. It's very balanced, and I want Thomas thanks for that. Secondly, I want to condemn attempts to humiliate Macedonian nation. Sorry, colleagues, but if you say Macedonia is Greek, Macedonia is Bulgarian, anything else is absolutely non-credible to me and to many others. I want to warn you of the eruption of nationalism and misusing accession process. Sorry, Mr. Valchev, Mr. Kovachev or Volgin. In all EU countries, people praising Nazis, collaborators with Hitler and Himmler, people working on establishment of SS troops should be punished by state institutions, and those who name clubs after Nazis should be in prison, not in government. So please, colleagues, stop abuse accession process to ventilate unquenched nationalism. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now over to Sebastian Tynkänen.
Madam President, free speech must remain the bedrock of any democratic society, including those aspiring to join our union. But we must also recognise the clear and present danger of foreign interference. In North Macedonia, coordinated malign influence campaigns by hostile third countries are actively undermining trust towards institutions, polarising society and targeting electoral integrity. This is strategic manipulation. North Macedonia must continue to bolster their cybersecurity, strengthening media literacy and building public resilience. By defending truth and transparency, North Macedonia would not only help their people, but the whole European security. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, on behalf of the European Commission, I would like to give the floor to the Commissioner, Marta Kos. You have the floor.
Honourable members, dear Rapporteur Thomas Waitz, many thanks for this debate. We will continue to work and support North Macedonia in its accession process and stand ready to move it forward. We count on North Macedonia to take the necessary steps to complete the opening phase of accession and to maintain efforts at the technical level, notably on the fundamentals. I count on the support of this House to remain engaged. North Macedonia belongs in the European Union.
Thank you very much, Madam Commissioner. Now I would like to ask the Rapporteur, Thomas Waitz, to speak.
Chair, thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, colleagues, for your contributions. Just to make one thing clear, this is a report of the European Parliament on the state of accession of an accession country called North Macedonia. And this is what it should talk about, and this is what we tried together with my shadow rapporteurs to portray in this report, with the good and the needed reforms, with the progress and the still to-dos. And I'm doing this, and I think most of us are doing this, for the citizens of North Macedonia, for the citizens of Bulgaria, of Greece, of all our European Union. And let me say one thing as an Austrian. European Union is built on leaving our past behind. Yes, we reconcile. Yes, we apologize. Yes, we acknowledge the atrocities that have happened in the last century, but we leave history with this behind and we join forces to build our common future. And this is what Germany and France managed. And this is what Austria managed with its neighbors, Slovenia, Hungary, Czech Republic. We were overcoming history and we joined forces for the common good, for our citizens, for our European Union, for the destiny of our societies. And this is what European Union is about, this is what accession is about, and this is also what this report aims to be about. I hope that you will vote in favour tomorrow. Thank you for the good cooperation and thanks for everything.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I hereby close the debate. The vote on this point will take place tomorrow. And now let's proceed to discuss the next point on our agenda. A report by Rasa Junkiewicz on Georgia reports from 2023 and 2024. I hand it over to the rapporteur, Rasa Juknevičiene. You have 4 minutes.
Dear colleagues, it is a very sad but probably fitting coincidence that we are discussing the situation in Georgia on the same evening as the debate on Belarus. Who would have thought that Georgia, once the flag bearer of democracy, not only in the region but among all Eastern Partnership countries, would turn into a Lukashenko-style autocracy? That today we would be speaking not only about Belarusians in Lukashenko's prison, but also Georgians in Bidzina Ivanishvili prisons. I would like to thank all the pro-European political groups in the European Parliament and their appointed shadow rapporteurs for the excellent cooperation. The attacks by representatives of the Ivanishvili regime against members of European Parliament, even EU ambassadors, have only strengthened our common position. We understand that these statements do not reflect the views of the Georgian people. We see their struggle and we recognize their clear desire to continue on the path toward EU membership. As the situation has worsened since the AFET vote, new amendments by pro-European parties have been prepared, which I recommend we support. The main proposed changes include updating the text to reflect the most serious recent developments, specifically the detention and politically motivated sentencing of almost all main opposition leaders and the legal prosecution of prominent civil society organizations. Updating our position on the upcoming municipal elections due to the imprisonment of the key opposition leaders. These elections cannot be considered free and fair. There will also be 2 oral amendments. I propose we support both. One relates to the worsening health of Mzia Amaglobeli, an imprisoned journalist whose condition is rapidly deteriorating. She is losing her eyesight, has been denied proper medical care, and remains behind bars for political reasons. Another amendment strengthens the language around the review of the EU-Georgia Association Agreement. It calls for immediate action as Georgia has clearly breached core democratic principles. I want to emphasize the full responsibility for the possible suspension of Georgia's visa-free regime lies with Ivanishvili and his party. Visa-free travel is granted to democratic countries, not to regimes that imprison citizens for political reasons. Georgia matters to all Europe. The regime falsely claims that no one cares about the Georgian people. That is why their friends in the Kremlin and the far right, like ESN, have proposed amendments opposing Georgia's accession to the EU. No, we will not vote for that. The Georgian people who have been fighting for European Georgia for over 200 days are true European heroes. They deserve our full respect and unwavering support. Thank you.
Bardzo dziękuję pani poseł. W imieniu komisji głos.
Thank you very much. Now the floor goes to the Commissioner.
Madam President, honourable members, I would like to express my gratitude to Rapporteur Rasa Juknevičiene. Thank you, dear Rasa, for your dedication and outstanding work on the report. And thank you to all members of the European Parliament for your dedication to upholding democratic values and safeguarding Georgia's European future. Let me be clear, what we are witnessing in Georgia is far from anything we expect from a candidate country. Georgia's democratic foundations are being eroded by the day. The Georgian Dream regime has launched its most dramatic crackdown on the country's pro-EU crackdown yet on the country's pro-EU opposition and civil society. A number of opposition leaders have been jailed over the past weeks. Civil society and independent media are facing continued attacks. The authorities continue rolling out new repressive legislation without due public consultations. The authorities' repressive actions run contrary to EU values and principles. As rightly pointed out in your report, the EU has an important role to play in providing a lifeline to Georgia's civil society and independent media. Since the start of the crisis, the Commission has already considerably stepped up efforts and is currently implementing projects supporting civil society organisations that amount to over €46 million. Additional funding, €32 million, will be made available shortly following adoption by Member States. We have thought serious challenge how to assure finances to the civil society organisations to avoid further repression by the Georgian government. The latest repressive laws, notably the Foreign Agent Registration Act, the amendments to the law on grants and to the law on broadcasting, will have a negative impact on our ability to deliver EU financial assistance. But let me be clear, we are committed to finding the best ways for our support to reach Georgian civil society and media without endangering their safety. You also know the disinformation campaigns and narratives against the EU and its member states. These attacks are simply not acceptable. In order to combat this disinformation, we are stepping up our communication efforts. An additional €7 million is set to be contracted by this autumn upon approval by member states. These funds will be used to improve the Georgian public's understanding of the EU and its integration path, and to enhance citizens' access to accurate, diversified and credible information. The people of Georgia are overwhelmingly in favour of a European future for their country. We must continue working together and show to the Georgian people that we stand with them. Next week, the Foreign Affairs Council will discuss the situation in Georgia, including possible next actions to address the Georgian Dream government repressive action and all responsible for violence and human rights violations. All options should remain on the table to respond to the current backsliding on the democratic standards, while keeping a possibility for engagement in interest-based policies beyond the enlargement framework, including in the context of the Black Sea strategy and regional connectivity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Commissioner. On behalf of the EPP, I would like to give the floor to Mr. Andrej Kolar. 1 minute.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, dear Commissioner, dear colleagues. I will be a little bit critical now. During the debate about Bosnia and Herzegovina, I said that we need to do everything to make sure that we oppose Russia when it tells countries that are aiming for EU accession that EU is not an option. I said that we must show that EU is the best option. And I'm afraid we failed to do this in Georgia. Look at the outcomes of the elections. When Georgian Dream won, the only high-ranking representative of the EU who visited Georgia was, unfortunately, Viktor Orban, a Trojan horse of Russia inside the EU who opposes our efforts to enlarge the EU. There were no high-ranking EU officials who would travel to Tbilisi to stand aside the President, Salome Zubrashvili, to support her and the demonstrations that were taking part in the streets. Rasa Yuknevičiene, who I'm very grateful for her honesty in this report, was the only one to represent the European Parliament, or with a small group of MEPs. I think we need to change this approach. If we really want to do what we mean and what we say in our resolutions, we need to take action. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, on behalf of the Progressive Group of Socialists and Democrats in the European Parliament, Tobias Kremer, 1 minute.
Dear colleagues, if you're looking for a definition for democratic backsliding, you can forget the dictionary. You can just look at what Georgian Dream has been doing to its own population over the last few years. Not long ago, Georgia was a beacon of hope on the Caucasus. But what we are seeing today are foreign agent laws, rigged elections, brutal crackdowns on peaceful protesters. Georgian Dream is applying the Russian playbook of intimidation, disinformation, manipulation to the letter. And let's be absolutely clear, this isn't a distant or abstract problem, but a direct challenge to Europe itself and a real living nightmare to the people of Georgia. For the journalists thrown into jail, for the opposition leaders beaten in the streets, but especially for those millions of ordinary Georgians, students, nurses, farmers, workers, teachers, for the 80% of Georgians who still yearn for a European future, who still believe in their freedom, and who still stand up to the authorities and protest over 200 days later. And this report is also our opportunity to give these Georgians a voice and to tell them that we hear you, that we see you, and that we stand with you on your path to Georgia's European future. Thank you.
Bardzo dziękuję, panie pośle, w imieniu grupy Patrioci. Thank you very much on behalf of Patriots for Europe, András László. 1.5 minutes.
Ez a jelentés Grúziáról egy szégyen.
This report on Georgia is a disgrace. It is a disgrace to the European Parliament. It's neither European nor democratic in nature, and it lacks respect. However, it is clear that the majority of the European Parliament would like to see a puppet government in Georgia. And until that happens, you deliberately are working to exacerbate European-Georgian relations. This is exactly the purpose that your report serves. Just to mention a few points, the European Parliament wants to tell the Georgians who to have in government, that they should hold new elections. You also want to tell them when, who to organize these elections, who can monitor the results, and basically, and now I quote, what the true will of the people is. You know that better than them. It's the EP that wants to decide who the real Georgian civilians are, those who were funded by the Biden administration through USAID. Now that the Trump administration has cut off that funding to the left-wing globalist activist network, you want the EU to adopt these organizations. It is the EP that wants to decide Georgia's foreign policy, even though that is a national competence even for EU member states. You do not see Georgia as a partner. You look on Georgia as a colony. What is needed is not sanctions, but an honest dialogue that respects the sovereignty and geopolitical situation of Georgia, as well as one that focuses on our common values and common interests.
Pośle, głos zabierze pani poseł Małgorzata Gosiewska w imieniu Grupy Europejskiej. Madam Gosiewska has the floor. ECR, 1 minute. Georgia is becoming a dictatorship. The Georgian Dream, a pro-Russian party, is breaking the law and under fast-track procedures is marginalizing opposition, muzzling the independent media, cutting off financing for NGOs. People take to the streets, but this is being brutally suppressed. 8 opposition leaders have been recently arrested. The former president, Saakashvili, is still unlawfully imprisoned. What Georgia is doing is to build closer ties with Russia, Belarus and Iran. They are moving the country away from Europe and from the West. This is against the ambition and the sentiment of the nation, of the Georgian nation. We need political isolation of the Georgian dream on the international arena. We need to maintain contact with President Zurabishvili. We also need individual sanctions targeting individual people. Political prisoners should be freed. We also need a fund to support the Georgian civil society. Thank you. Thank you very much. I give the floor to Madame Loiseau. 1 minute.
Nika Melia.
Nika Melia, Nika Gravina, Badr Jabrish, Mamuka Karachi, Iraqi Ovstrotvili, Georgi Vashaji, Georgi Tagamuchi, Shira Jersey, and of course Misha Saakashvili. The whole of the Georgian opposition is being persecuted at the moment. Many of them are in prison. Misia Amaglobili is in detention and her health state is getting worse and worse. She's in detention like other journalists. Georgia Ramishvili, who's an entrepreneur, has been arrested. Protesters protest every evening and they're risking their lives. what is their crime. They don't want to roll over. They don't want to allow Georgia to become dictatorship in favor of Russia, where it was pro-European democracy. We must support the Georgian people, and we must isolate the Tbilisi regime.
Thank you very much, Sergei Lagodinsky. 1 minute.
Colleagues, in light of recent catastrophic developments, it is clear what we're lacking. The EU needs a long-term strategic approach towards Georgia. Without vision and effective tools, we remain unprepared in the face of anti-democratic backsliding and other challenges that Georgia and the region are having. We must go beyond crisis management. We must think about larger picture. Commissioner Koh's Black Sea strategy offers an opportunity to align our vision of future Georgia with regional priorities. But this is only possible if civil society is free, if democracy is protected, if opposition is not oppressed. And yes, we can do both, be geopolitical and stand up to repression. Speak for the imprisoned and for all other Georgians who see Europe as their future. We can support Georgia as a victim of Russian aggression and criticize a ruling party that imitates the aggressor itself. It's a balance, but one worth fighting for Georgia, for Eastern Partnership, and for the future of Europe.
Thank you very much. Now, on behalf of the left, Danilo Della Valle, 1 minute.
Grazie, Presidente.
Thank you. The 8th of October, 13th of November, 17th of December, the 21st of January, the 18th of June, the 8th of July. From October to today, you've had us discussing about Georgia 6 times, all the problems that it has that we're familiar with. So it seems that basically, I imagine that there may be somebody who doesn't sleep at night thinking of Georgia. But I've got a solution for you. So it won't be the 7th time. Try and close your eyes and just imagine that Georgia is in the Middle East. Imagine that this country is killing hundreds of journalists. Imagine that thousands of citizens are being imprisoned without a trial. Imagine that the government is supporting apartheid and ethnic cleansing. Imagine that ministers are saying that they want to exterminate an entire people. Imagine that the government kills over 100,000 people, most of them women and children. They fire on desperate children queuing up to get a chunk of bread. So yes, you can sleep quietly because for the past 9 months we've been voting on resolutions on Georgia and nothing about the genocide in Palestine. One single way of saying this, you should be ashamed.
On behalf of the ESN, Mr. Neuhoff, 1.5 minutes.
Kolleginnen und Kollegen.
Ladies and gentlemen, the European Parliament likes to see itself as a moral institution, as a judge who chooses between good and evil in politics. For months now, the Parliament has been getting hot and bothered about the fact that in October 2024, the Georgians did not elect the government that the EU had planned. And for months, committees and bodies have been wondering about how to punish the Georgians for this. The Georgian government then had the cheek to decide to postpone negotiations with the EU until 2028, which the EU would have liked to do. The report on the EPP on Georgia should not be made the scapegoat for this. It presents a catalogue of sins and comes up with all sorts of demands which are against EU legislation, such as personal sanctions or legal procedures or collective punishment. It doesn't say anything about the Georgian government removing its country out of the conflict between two blocs, which is what we'd have liked to drive them into. This report ignores its own legislation in this report, and the ESN will vote against. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I give the floor to Mr. Krzysztof Brejza. 1 minute.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Last month I went on a mission to Georgia, and you cannot be talking about Russian interference. It is a copy of the Russian system, Russian regime. When I hear the voices of Viktor Orban and AfD, who speaks here and who has Putin support, who wants the young Georgians to be left alone, to be handed over to Russia, it should be stated clearly, you are working for the Kremlin and for Putin. There will be no consent to this in the EU and in Europe. I will tell the Georgians, we are with you, we stand by you, we see your fight, we see your struggles, but we also see those who are destroying you. We see those officials of the regime, such as Judge Nino Gulashtashvili. She is a judge of the Georgian regime who condemned a 21-year-old boy, Mete Devizi, for 4.5 years of imprisonment for organizing a pro-European demonstration. This is the reality in Georgia. I would like that woman not to be entitled to spend her holidays in Italy. I'd like all the officials of the pro-Russian regime to be banned from the EU. We need hard sanctions in order to get rid of those who are Russifying Georgia. Thank you very much. Now, Nacho Sanchez Amor, 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam. Well, the script of authoritarians is really boringly similar, if it's not just because it creates such a lot of pain, the pressure on journalists, the dismantling of the judiciary, the paranoid imaginations of enemies. All this, at the end of the day, ends up with the imprisonment of the opposition. I mean, Putin detains them and kills them, but others are killed even without being detained. In Georgia, they're just removed from the stage. And if there's any doubt as to the political nature of this persecution, look at the offer of the president of the country. He offers to make sure that the opposition leaders leave the prisons, and then they need to stand for local elections. So that they offer you the keys to your cell if you legitimize their elections and their victories in the municipal elections. So be very careful with the comparison when you use about Georgia and Turkey, because exactly the same things are happening.
Mr. Žalimas, you have the floor for 1 minute.
Dear Commissioner, dear colleagues, I fully support the report on Georgia as it is in full compliance with the EU values and EU law. Georgian institutions have been captured by the authoritarian criminal oligarch regime. The Georgian dream follows the Kremlin's manual of repression. They act as bandits and speak as bandits. Recently, the last formally remaining opposition for Georgia party representatives was stripped of its mandates in the parliament for a peaceful boycott. That is a means of political fight in any democracy. However, what is really against democracy, it is the existence of a current single-party parliament. The EU response must be stronger. First, we must find a way how to sanction on the EU level the Georgian Dream regime and to support the Georgian people. We must strictly follow non-recognition policy of the Georgian Dream authorities. There is still one key difference of Tbilisi from Moscow and Minsk. That is the continued presence of the active civil society in the streets, demanding new parliamentary elections and striving for a European future. We cannot abandon the Georgian people. Thank you.
Dziękuję bardzo, panie pośle. Głos zabierze pan poseł.
Thank you very much. I give the floor to Mr. Dostal. 1 minute.
Kolegové, ve věci Gruzie bych...
Distinguished colleagues, with respect to Georgia, I'd call on your respect after the breakdown of the Soviet Union. There was a drop as well as loss of the state and government. Then now they are experiencing improvement as well as Chinese investments. Well, you don't like it? Compare it to the Ukraine under Zelensky. What he is asking is a turnover and threatens the stop on cooperation. How would you like if the United States interfered into the European Commission's affairs? The Georgians have elected a government which is not against Europe. It only defends its own country. You will not change it if you pressurize them. We will lose a partner and ally. Thank you.
I give the floor to Mr. Szczerba. 1 minute.
Szanowna pani przewodnicząca.
Madam Chair, ladies and gentlemen, it's been more than 200 days that every day the citizens of Georgia protest against the elections that have been stolen, but in truth, their European future that has been stolen away from them. Everything begins with the falsification of elections. This is always the first step. Since the last year's election, Georgia has been on a path towards Russia, towards China, and towards the club of autocrats. Aspiration for Europe is concrete actions, is free media, independent prosecution, independent courts. If we look at what they do and what they say, there is an abyss between them. We should support in the EU. We should support the EU aspirations of the Georgian society. However, the local elections in Georgia are approaching. This might be a test, Madam Commissioner, also in terms of what we can offer to Georgia as a community. Thank you very much. Now I hand it over to Marcos Ros Sempere. 1 minute.
Gracias.
Thank you, Madam Commissioner. Well, Georgia's aspiration to be part of the European Union is now turned into a nightmare. And who could be blamed? Well, Georgian dream. We already saw this during the elections in October. The buying of votes, irregularities before and during the elections. These were not clean elections. And the Georgian dream is now becoming an authoritarian party. They attack fundamental rights. They promote legal reforms to criminalize legitimate protests and the opposition. And what about us? We can't allow this. We want Georgia in the European Union, and we will try to do this, to achieve this. The country deserves this, and Georgia dreams cannot take these dreams away. So let us support sanctions against those introducing this kind of nightmare so that the opposition receives support from its allies. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We will now start cut the eye procedure. There is only one person, Sebastian Tinkinen.
Madam President, once a promising candidate for EU integration, Georgia is now on its way to a terrible direction. Democracy, human rights and rule of law, the fundamental principles of the European Union. These are exactly the ones that are in alarming decline in Georgia currently. Georgia's EU integration cannot come to question now, not at the cost of our common values. However, the responsibility now lies in the hands of Georgian leaders who are betraying their own people. The fraudulent parliamentary elections, brutal repression by the authorities towards their own people, and taking their country to Russian-inspired path are proofs of this. The Georgian people have repeatedly shown their commitment to the European future. While we are tough against the Georgian government, the Georgian people we must not abandon. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, on behalf of the European Commission, Marta Kos, the Commissioner, the floor is yours.
Honourable members, I would like to thank you once again for the interest in the situation in Georgia. We share the concerns set out in your report. Violence against protesters and threats, intimidation and assaults against the civil society, political opposition and independent media have no place in an EU candidate country. At the backdrop of democratic backsliding, it is important to show that the EU continues to stand with the Georgian people, civil society and independent media. We should not be afraid to speak against the repressive actions that go against our values and principles. However, with the increasingly difficult situation, we need to be careful when communicating about our support, not about what we do, but to whom we help. The safety of our partners and beneficiaries needs to be ensured above all. While a vast majority of Georgian people wanted Georgia to join the European Union, the Georgian authorities are leading the country away from its EU path. The responsibility lies solely with the Georgian Dream government. A return to the EU path could only be considered if the Georgian authorities take credible steps to reverse democratic backsliding, meaning stopping the violence against citizens, releasing all those unjustly detained, suspending repressive laws and engaging in a meaningful dialogue with civil society and all political actors to find a way out of the current crisis. In view of the deteriorating situation, the Commission stands ready to explore further measures. A coordinating approach among Member States will be essential in this regard.
Bardzo dziękuję pani komisarz. Głos zabierze sprawozdawca pani poseł Rasa Junkevičiūtė. Bardzo proszę.
Thank you very much, and I give the floor to Ms. Frau Junkevičiūtė.
I am glad that apart from a few MEPs who are always pro-Russian, all the other groups who have spoken today are on the side of an European Georgia. Thank you for that. Madam Commissioner, I know that you are also with the people of Georgia. I very much hope that the European Council will soon adopt the necessary position and that the Member States will take action, first of all, on the sanctions against the regime. I appeal to the Danish Presidency. Take the initiative to bring countries together, at least willing countries, to put pressure on the regime for new, free, fair election. This is the only way to help Georgia. Thank you very much. I hope that tomorrow we will adopt this report with overwhelming majority. Thank you.
Bardzo dziękuję pani poseł. Zamykam debatę. Głosowanie nad tym punktem.
Thank you very much. That winds up